control and make sure you don't say anything that you're not authorized or cleared or given said clearance classifications to. You have to show credentials based on what you're going to say. Though.
Understood. I'll make sure to show original. Would it be okay if I did original sources and I showed the viewers the sources that I got the information from as I explained it to them?
I guess we can allow that for now.
Okay.
But again, don't say anything that we don't like.
I understand.
Or we're coming.
Understood. Oh, are we live? Is it okay if I start the show now? Okay. I have permission to start the show. Welcome to another episode of National Divorce Talk Raw. We're doing special black shirt, colored tie, Cali hats. This is sort of like the de facto Jason Wright CEO uniform. Just sort of happened. Jason Wright's in the studio here. He'll be doing some commentary. We're doing a variety of episodes of National Divorce Talk Raw. He's somewhat familiar with the material. We cover the material, and we go to original commentary from Jason. So today's episode is a relatively quick episode. It's going to be about liberals backing secession. So a lot of the talking point out there is only conservatives back secession. That's not true. Now, obviously, secession right now is vastly more popular with conservatives, of course. But the idea that it's not backed by liberals is not true. For here in CalExit, we know liberals back secession. But this isn't exactly about CalExit. This is about American national people who are liberal backing the idea of national divorce and people's peaceful separation, sort of independent of California. I just wanted to contradict the conservative narrative that only conservatives are interested in national divorce. Actually, there's a lot of liberals who are too, especially after Roe v. Wade. I'm not going to show you the California examples. I'm going to show you the national examples just to keep it national. So here we go. So recently we had Kathy Griffin. Kathy Griffin said, if you don't want a civil war, vote for Democrats in November. If you do want a civil war, vote Republican. She literally just said that. 27.5 thousand likes.
That tells me there are at least 27,000 or so people who feel and think that exact same way, which is kind of scary because that's always just a small little portion of society as a whole. Not everyone's even aware of who she is.
I expect many who will disagree with the fact that both sides see the others and separation is the only peaceful way forward. Also seeing blah, blah, blah. So we'll just go back again. Anyways, that's Kathy Griffin. That's a liberal. She's saying it. 27.9% backed her. I'm assuming those are fellow liberals. She is not alone. Lawrence Tribe is also another liberal. He is a law professor. He's routinely pointed out to by liberal news. Many Americans, conservative as well as liberal, would see defederalization as tantamount to an admission that the U.S. can no longer boast an enlightened and ideologically cohesive citizenry and is no longer a large and powerful unitary democracy. Now, he's making a quote there that seems like a contradiction, or like, national divorce wouldn't be so great, but he is advertising an article by the New York Review of Books on why it's a good reason to disunite America. So that's Lawrence Tribe, well-respected liberal scholar, lawyer, talking about and promoting an article that talks about splitting America up. This is the article Lawrence Tribe linked to, these disunited states. New York Review of Books is based upon the New York Times. That is a liberal newspaper. This is a article by Stephen Simpson and Jonathan Stevenson, liberals who are talking about why it might be a good idea to split America up in order to avoid violence. It is time to consider a radical solution to stave off the prospect of political violence and even civil war in the United States. So that's the liberal, their newspaper, talking about a liberal book recommended by a liberal professor with another famous liberal saying, let's secede. They're not alone. If you remember, here's Sarah Silverman.
Be a positive one. I don't know, but if people aren't getting along, like in relationship, they break up, So like, why don't we just finally just realize that these states aren't working and like divide up into like 2 or 3 countries? Like USA one.
That's Sarah Silverman. She said that last year, almost at the same time. Here's Ron Perlman said that this year, only a few months ago, it's time that every state, they would elect Republicans to represent them and all the rest of us separate. You don't want to live in my world. And I certainly don't want to live in yours. So Kathy Griffin, Lawrence Tribe, New York Review of Books, Sarah Silverman, Ron Perlman, and now we have Froma Hagop. I'm going to make sure I'm saying that name right. Froma Harop wrote this article that's everywhere this week. So this article has appeared in at least 15 different newspapers. I've been watching. This wasn't a one-time. She got this in syndicated. So this article is all over the place in newspapers in multiple states and national publications. It went into syndication. It's already been printed 15 times in 15 different things. Just to prove something, here's Froma Harop, PBS. She did work on Fox News, but she also worked on MSNBC, NPR, The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, New York Times, Harper's Bazaar, and she's a contributor to the Populist Progressive. So, yeah, I get there's Fox News, but PBS, MSNBC, NPR, The Daily Show, she's a liberal. I think we can, that was the point. There she is, well-known liberal. And she says, no, I don't want America to break up, but maybe we should be separate from these crazy MAGA people. By the way, she said this before Joe Biden's speech. So before Joe Biden's had a speech saying 74 million Americans, all the MAGA people, are bad for America, she had this essay saying maybe we should secede from all the MAGA people. And then Joe Biden's speech came out a few days later. And of course, it's, Republicans are talking about civil war. Okay, but now you are. And we just showed you how a bunch of other liberals are too. So it's starting. This is what I mean. Liberals are always saying Republicans are the only ones talking about it. Well, you're a liberal and you're talking about it. And here's all these other liberals. But just wanted to show the dichotomy. No, I don't want America to break up. I'm a left-leaning, moderate, hardcore liberal, actually. On the other hand, let's consider the possibilities. Suppose we skip the war part and imagine an amicable divorce.
That's exactly what we've been saying.
Do you recognize
for
that
years.
phrase? Do you recognize that phrase, amicable divorce?
That is exactly what we have been saying for years. Literal years, folks. Glad to know people are finally coming around, finally helping to spread the talking points. Thank you, because ultimately it's not just about us, it's about getting the job done.
That's from Froma Harop. Suppose we skip the war part and imagine an amicable divorce. Let me show you that article. Let me show this showing. This is really important. Okay, yeah. So here's the article. A MAGA secession could possibly work from Froma Harop. You can read it. Republicans say civil war. No, I don't want to break the country up. I'm a left-leaning moderate. On the other hand, suppose we skip the war part and imagine amicable divorce. Trump, MAGA people are bad. MAGA people is bad. Biden has the economic drivers of the country. The people who voted for Trump aren't very economically successful. Then here's Lindsey Graham, which we just showed you in just the previous episode of National Divorce Talk Raw, the one right before this, where Lindsey Graham said there will be riots in the streets if the federal government goes forward with the prosecution of Trump, given the Clinton debacle. So here again, here's a liberal interpreting it exactly as Crystal on Breaking Points, the liberal interpreted it. Lindsey Graham was threatening the federal government when he said that. He was not warning people to prevent loss of life. I happen to completely disagree. I think Lindsey Graham did a service. I don't think he was threatening. I think he was saying this is going to be bad, just to let you know. I think liberals don't want to hear that. And I think they want to say, see, he's threatening us. Go full speed ahead with the indictment of Trump, which is only going to make things worse. We just covered that in the show before. So she's talking about Lindsey Graham. Trump's bad. Lindsey Graham's bad. Again, I don't want a national breakup. But look at this. How realistic is this phrase? It's my hope that come the November midterms, patriotic voters across the political rainbow will band together to disempower a national party bent on destroying the democracy. Isn't it interesting that she's talking about people need to band together to disempower a national party bent on destroying democracy? And she said this in a speech publicized everywhere right before Joe Biden gives a speech saying the exact same thing. Is that a total coincidence in your opinion?
Well, I mean, it may potentially be. I don't know one way or the other with absolute certainty. May potentially be absolute coincidence. However, I don't usually just readily believe that a unicorn, farted rainbow dust and flew across my path. Usually I like to look into it, and 9 times out of 10, there's a sort of example that, one can use to gauge what the truth might be, kind of a litmus test, if you will. And we have seen things in the past, both recent and a little more distant, where someone says something and the powers that be liked it and liked, the catchiness of the wording, and so they picked it up and start running with it. And then mainstream corporate media goes and just, Biden says, well, actually, no, an even better example. Hillary Clinton, the deplorables, right? Look how quickly media and government were both parroting the same thing. Deplorables, deplorables, deplorables. Russia, Russia, Russia. I mean, we've got more than enough litmus examples here that one may need to assume, but I think it might be a safe assumption. Good to see you, Mr. Miller.
Daniel Miller, if I know you're a busy man, but if you want, here's the link. We just posted it to you. You're welcome to come on the show. Yes. Jason, what happens is, so we're in the studio and the studio lights are like really, really, really bright. See how I have the shade underneath my eyes? That's because it's like you have to do it really bright or the video doesn't come in. So Jason's like, I'm not used to this. So he's like, so I said, yes, you can put on your shades. I'm used to the bright lights.
Look at my pretty light, sparkly blues there.
Right.
They don't do so well in this.
Yeah. And see, I have like damn near pitch black eyes. So he has light blue eyes. He can get.
Well, you could come in right now.
You could come in right now. You should appear in a box in the studio, and then I would click. So if you're not seeing something that says "Welcome to the studio," log out. Hey, that was his call. He's technically boss, administratively. So he's like, hey, this is blinding my eyes.
And I didn't want to look scowly and squinty the whole time. You better do a good job, Marcus.
Nothing but love to the Texas Nationalist Movement. Texas Nationalist Movement is also dedicated to peaceful separation. Let's put that in there.
Yeah, and as the CEO / Collected Envoy, I am totally still eager to go out there on an envoy mission, go hang out with y'all. See, and I've been practicing y'all. I've got it in my vocabulary now. And yeah, if someone provides me a cowboy hat with a little bear or something, maybe a bear with a red star, or just a red star, I'd wear it while there for you, for y'all.
That's Daniel Miller. Yeah,
Okay.
OMG. Yeah, so he says he'll be here in 5 minutes. If so, we'll keep the stream going. And, great topic, right? Liberals backing secession. So I wanted to go to this comment from the article, A MAGA Secession Would Work. And just going to print this quote here. So this is from A MAGA Secession Could Possibly Work from Froma Harop, as we said, where she said, if we must divide the nation, let's do it without violence. That's exactly what we're saying, and we're liberals. Let's skip the war part. Imagine amicable divorce. That phrase was invented by Yes California, so we're liberals. We're agreeing with her. Again, there's the article. She's a liberal. We showed you other liberals who back secession, but this is the quote that got me. Was she was going, look, if we have to, we can split the country up peacefully. But I don't want to split the country up, and I don't think we need to. She was saying if we have to, we do that. But also we don't need to do it. Why? Because of this quote right here. So we don't need to split the country up, says Froma Harop, because in my hope, will come in November midterms that patriotic voters across the political rainbow will band together to disempower a national party bent on destroying the democracy. Liz Cheney's leading the way was the rest of that phrase. So Liz Cheney lost hard. She's not leading anything, especially after she massively publicly embarrassed. I mean, her vote tally, and I'm not giving an opinion, I'm just saying her vote tally was this way, and then it went total 180 degrees opposite. So, and she got spanked hard because she went against Trump in her own district really, really hard. So if you can't even win your own district, and if the people turn on you in a tidal wave fashion, she didn't lose a little bit. She got pounded into the dirt. And it was because she took on Trump. So the people of Wyoming don't want what Liz Cheney has to sell. Good luck trying to convince the rest of the country when your own people don't like you. That's generally never worked in American politics. You've never had a president who was hated by their own people in their own region and then able to go get votes across the state. Now, you have had presidential elections where maybe the other candidate won that state. That was the president's home state. But the president wasn't hated in that state. They were liked. They just kind of lost a little bit to the other candidate. This is different. This is like 3/4 of that place hates you. And you're going to go, I represent Wyoming, middle of America. By the way, they hate me and were disgusted and they threw me out really, really hard. But vote for me because I can get middle America to back me. Does that make sense to you?
Oh, yeah, it makes perfect sense because these are the same people who say things like, I literally speak for everyone when I say abolish all guns. Well, I mean, I don't think everyone should have guns, and I don't think anyone should have certain things like heavy machine guns, anti-tank rifles like the Lati, missile systems, tanks, armored personnel carriers, right? 900-pound bombs. Let's not all have all of that, okay? Because the more of that that's out there, the more likely something is to go wrong and innocent people to get hurt.
Yeah.
So if we want to have, firearms to protect ourselves, fine. I'm not against that. I've gone to shooting ranges and, I've actually also hunted, even though I'm a green. I eat
Since
what I
18.
kill, but you know, at a certain point, we need something reasonable. Things need to stay sane and reasonable. And when someone claims to speak for literally everybody, well, no one person can. People can have different opinions.
Wow. Wow. So for everybody who doesn't know, this is Daniel Miller, and he is president of the Texas Nationalist Movement. Dan, I know you're a busy man. I want to ask you a few questions real quick. Because
No, I do not own a tanker and armored personnel carrier, but I can neither confirm nor deny that maybe I shop for those things on eBay.
You are Texan, so we would expect nothing less. I would be shocked if you were like, I have no interest in an armored personnel. Right. Right. So you gave kind of a halfway answer, but it's plausible. It's plausible. You can buy that. We are Daniel Miller, head of the Texas Nationalist Movement, also dedicated to peaceful legal separation by us. Daniel, I've been telling everybody about how you and I are both fans of an author called Gene Sharp. Am I lying about that?
That is not a lie. Not a lie at all. Gene was one of the most brilliant people that you could possibly imagine. And I'll tell you, interesting story. I never got to meet Gene, but when I did that interview with Atlantic Magazine, oddly enough, the reporter and I got to talking about Gene because, and I don't remember how, other than he sort of asked maybe philosophically where the organization was coming from about political change, and he made him a little brag that he got to meet Gene before he passed. And it was like, I liked you before, but now I'm just too jealous. I don't know if we can get along. I don't know if we can get along. But Gene was fundamental. I mean, look, one of the things that we knew from the outset, when we founded the TNM back in 2005, was that tactics are tactics, right? I mean, that's just, there, as long as we are not behaving in an immoral or an unethical way, then, the tactics stand. And tactics for empowering the people to make the decision about self-government, those tactics are things that movements like ours just absolutely have to study. I mean, anyone who hasn't just really hasn't done their homework, right? So, for us, we talk about Article 1, Section 2 of the Texas Constitution a lot. And it starts with the words, all political power is inherent in the people. And it applies, right? Whether it's Texas or anywhere else, that's just sort of a universal fact when it comes to the issues that we're talking about, this fundamental right of self-government. And so when we don't have, when that right of self-government is denied to us, right? Whether it's a dictator or a bureaucratic oligarchy or a political, cultural, and economic monstrosity centered in Washington, D.C., we have to look at the tactics that are necessary and the mindset necessary to do what needs to be done to reclaim our right of self-government. So, yeah, I would say, Marcus, that Gene Sharp is absolutely fundamental for people to read and understand.
And I was doing a shared screen when you were speaking, and the reason that I wanted to bring that up was that all of us secessionists have the baggage of people assuming that we are crazy and violent and we want to use something out of it. And our movement in New Hampshire, the three of us have been working very hard to say, no. There is a perfectly legal path. New Hampshire is following it through the elected officials. Texas is following it through your Republican Party. California is following it through our ballot initiatives. There's multiple legal paths. And you don't need to assume that we are violent or don't understand the law or don't want to work within the Constitution and don't want to work with the government and don't want to work with elected officials. That's all a lie. We're completely willing to do all of that. So That's why I bring up Gene Sharp, because people will not look at you because you're Texan. Sorry. You know me. Half my family's from Texas, so down in the picture. And they won't look at us and assume that. And so that I want to constantly point out to them that no, the leaders of these two movements are scholars who have studied the foremost expert on nonviolent revolution and who was involved in the peaceful revolutions, I think, in Egypt, Belarus. I mean, if you know Gene Sharp, it says everything about your movement and our movement, that we're that dedicated to peaceful and legal. But I want to ask you a few questions while we got you.
Sure, go for it.
I'm
here.
So we just did a show. Perhaps you saw a speech by President Joseph Biden with a blood red backdrop and dark coloring and active duty United States Marines flanking him, while he said effectively 74 million Americans were enemies of the state. Now, when I saw that speech as a liberal and as someone who doesn't like Trump and thinks January 6th was bad, I still said, hey, look, here's a couple facts. No president's ever done that. No president has ever done a blood red backdrop. No president has ever done a blood red backdrop with active military behind them. And no president's done those two things and said half the country and the other political party isn't just bad, isn't just somebody you shouldn't vote for. They are enemies of the country. I have never before seen that in history. I don't think that's happened before. Am I wrong? Or is this, are these, I'm a liberal, you're conservative, but are these demonstrable facts that nothing like that kind of speech has happened recently, folks? And it is a scary speech and people do have reason to go, whoa, or am I totally off base? And stuff like this happens all the time. It's not really a big deal. Presidents call out 74 million Americans and wipe them off the slate all the time. It's just, you tell me which one.
Yeah, it was, I think it represented a fundamental shift in where the quote unquote United States is. I mean, what people have to remember is that, we're on this live stream together, and we probably have different ways, different perspectives on how our respective states should govern one another. Right. And that's policy, right? That's just policy disagreements. I don't care particularly what France does, what their tax policy is. That's up to them to decide. Right. And so what people need to, I think, understand where Biden is concerned is that particular speech was effectively a kickoff for the big fracture, right? Not that haven't been all shattered and separated before, but that was literally like taking, a baseball bat and busting the glass. I mean, this is it. I mean, stick a fork in it, folks. It's done. Okay. The speech itself was pretty terrible. And I think that given the fact that none of the major networks would run it live, said everything that needed to be said about the speech and the direction that it was going, what he was trying to accomplish, to me, and this is what I said during an interview today, if he was signaling a base, it was not the base that people think that it was, right? If it was a call to arms to redouble their efforts to preserve the Union or whatever, it was literally the opposite of all of that. And he was calling to a small base of radicals that will essentially lap up everything that he says, right? And I don't look at that as a right or left issue. That is a government versus the people issue, right? And this is what I was getting to, Marcus. This is the real fight that people need to understand. While we in our varying states may disagree about how to carry out policy in our respective states, we ultimately have to reject the idea that one another are the enemy, right? And we have to begin to look at what we have here, and that is a political establishment versus the people. A political establishment that wants to centralize power in Washington, D.C., right? That wants to destroy us under the heel of 2.5 million unelected bureaucrats that wants to crush us under the weight of 180,000 pages of federal laws, rules, and regulations. That applies to all of us, right? Regardless of which state that we live in. And so it is the political establishment versus the people, and the tool that they have, their angle of attack has been the attack of self-government. Because if you guys get what you want and we get what we want, then they can't continue to centralize power in Washington, D.C. and keep us under their thumb. And that's why they hate us. And you know what? I'd rather be hated for what I am than loved for what I'm not.
That's got to be a Texan phrase that sounds exactly like the stuff my mom would say to me growing up. You guys, she had so many Texan phrases that you want something or you want nothing.
Well, I will tell you, during the interview today, I kind of stunned them a little bit because, you know, they were commenting about the speech and they talked about the crowds that he was not drawing. You know, I don't know if you've seen pictures of where he's going to speak, but I mean, it's empty rooms. I said, look, I'm going to tell you in the most Texan terms I possibly can. You could smear cow crap all over that guy and he couldn't draw flies. Right. So, I mean, it's just, you know, just kind of
my mom. Full disclosure: my mom's Texan. She was born and raised in Texas, and although she moved to California, likes the politics. That Texas girl's still there. You might move a Texan out of Texas, but you don't pull the Texan out of them. It's still. She cannot say the word pie correctly, so she says it the Texan way. Pie.
Pie. Yeah.
Not. Yeah. You're like, yeah. That's how you say it, and we're over here like, that's not pie. Did he say? He said paw. I said pie. So yeah, I love you guys. You guys have a million. She would have all sorts of phrases, and me and my brother thought that was silly. And then what happens? We turn 30 and 40, and we start saying it. And then we're in California, and they go, "I've never heard a phrase like that in my life."
Yeah,
I'm like,
it's like the difference between RP English and like Mancunian or Liverpool accent. You know?
Yeah. I just so many phrases. Well, let me ask you another question while I got you for a few minutes.
Sure.
Lindsey Graham gave a speech on TV, and he said, if they prosecute Donald Trump for the Mar-a-Lago documents raid, quotes, given the Clinton debacle, end quote, there will be riots in the streets. Some liberals have said, Lindsey Graham said that to intimidate the Justice Department from doing their job. Other people have said, no, James Comey went on TV and literally said, we caught Hillary Clinton mishandling her server and being, quotes, reckless, and quotes, not following our guidance, and quotes, secrets were lost, but quotes, because she told us that she didn't do it intentionally, we believed her. And so since it wasn't intentional, since that's what she said, we're not prosecuting her. But in the same speech, Comey says, this should not mean that another person who finds themselves in similar circumstances could conclude that they would not be prosecuted. The FBI director says, we're letting Clinton off, but just to be sure to all you Americans, don't assume that if you do this, you'll get off too.
Yeah.
Lindsey Graham was pointing at that. Now, I see a lot of liberals not mentioning what Comey said about Clinton at all, and then just going, well, Lindsey Graham's just threatening people. So is Lindsey Graham threatening people, or is he saying, hey, you basically gave Clinton a pass on live TV, and if you don't do that for Trump, and it comes down to some super nuanced legal argument, well, technically Clinton filled out form 501c4 and Trump filled out form 501c5, that you're going to have riots in the streets, because the American public is not going to tolerate, here's the little bit of difference between we let this person off and we let this person go free, but see how they're totally different in a professor's eyes. I don't buy that. I'm a liberal. I hate Trump, but I could see how people would go, that's not fair. That's political prosecution. You should have gotten them both. You didn't. Riots in the streets. So which one is it? Is Lindsey Graham threatening the system, or is he saying honestly how conservatives would feel, in your opinion?
Yeah, I don't know where Lindsey Graham comes from half the time, if I'm being honest. But I'll say this. I think one thing that we can all agree on is that we can be outraged when justice is applied unequally, right? When there's an unequal application of justice, it means that there really is no justice, right? And it's an odd thing. My daughter is a senior up at Texas Tech, and
Hey.
she had a class where she had to debate literally this very thing. So she calls the old man up, and we had hours of conversations about this, right?
Hey, your kid still listens to you.
Well, when it comes to debate class, I mean, I got national championships on the shelf, so she knows come to the source, right? So, but no, it was pretty cool to get to help her with that. But we had that conversation. I mean, it when you have justice, the unequal application of justice, you're going to get pushback, right? And oddly enough, I think it's interesting that the same people that were screaming what I just said as a justification for the summer of riots that we had with BLM and Antifa are the people that are calling out Lindsey Graham for suggesting that something like that might happen because of an unequal application of justice. And granted, the players are different. The circumstances are a bit different, but in the end, a principle is a principle, right? And if the principle is the equal application of justice, equal justice under the law, then the moment that we remove that equal justice, then do we really have law? Do we really have justice? Well, my friends, welcome to the federal system in the 21st century. It is a system of contradictions and hypocrisy, justified by a 24-hour news cycle that serves as alternatively for apologists for the federal government when their buddies in power, but serves to do nothing but tear down the system when their buddy is out of power. So I don't really care what Lindsey Graham's hot take on it is. I mean, Lindsey Graham is relevant to me as all get out, but he is signaling, I think, to a certain extent, that his finger's on the pulse. We're at a really dicey time in our history. One that we've said for many years is coming.
That we have.
One that we have tried to warn people about and utilize to encourage the urgency of the work that we're respectively doing. That states need to go govern themselves to avoid this tragedy that's about to unfold. And what's happened is the more control the federal government has, it becomes like a pressure cooker. They've continued to turn up the heat, and without releasing the pressure or dialing down the heat, what they've done is they've made a recipe for an explosion, something we warned about for many, many, many years.
I'm not smiling because I'm glad it's happening. I'm smiling because we said literally.
Did you just win the lottery?
No, I just gave the same. I just gave the same analysis you did on the show before this, and so it's cool that we just gave the analysis and then you gave your analysis and they line up, right? I didn't confer with you beforehand. We both kind of just came to the same place of whether you like Trump, whether you don't like Trump. This is all bad, folks. This is all bad for a president to do this. This is all bad for people to go riots in the streets. This is all bad for people, millions of people to question if the law is being applied fairly. That is a bad thing for people to have that much question about the legal system.
Well, look, I don't have a bunch of time to burn. If I'd have known that, I would have just said, okay, what Marcus said a while ago, but with an accent. And then that would have been it.
Sorry, Mom. I'm sorry, Mom. I shouldn't do that. That's not fair. That's not fair. Daniel. Yeah, so here's a question from the public. And then I have another controversial question. Quick question for you, Daniel. Love from South Carolina from James Young. Do you think Texas will vote yes on secession in 2023? And do you think some or southern states may follow? Your opinion.
Well, look, we've got a bit of a winding road to get there, right? So we've got general election in November, which will give us the final makeup of the state legislature, to let us know where we are. Pre-filing for bills starts 2 weeks after that. We're pretty confident that we're lining up our bullpen for the referendum, for that bill to be filed. Where it goes from there, I think it's completely dependent upon how much pressure we put on people. How much pressure we put on these legislators. what we're training our volunteers, and we got a big leadership training coming up this weekend. What we're training them is this, and I think this applies equally across all of our situations, is that one of the things that we really deride politicians for is they sacrifice their principles for political expediency, right? So we can't appeal to their principles because ultimately they will fold like Superman on Laundry Day. So what we have to do is we have to make our respective legislative paths politically expedient. And the one thing that these politicians fear more than anything else is not getting reelected. That is the biggest fear. So we are doing what we did in the last session. We're ramping up in their districts. We're getting ready. The legislative session for us starts in January. Our legislature only meets for 140 days every other year. So it's vitally important that we focus all of our efforts on this upcoming session, getting the bill filed, getting it across the finish line, and the date in the legislation this go around would put the election in November of 2023. So here's what we know. If we get it to the ballot in November of 2023, we win. And we don't win by a little, we win by a lot. We know that third-party polling numbers have shown it. That big poll that at a Survey USA, I don't know if you talked about that on here before, but that was hardcore here in Texas. That was 66% of likely voters, regardless of partisan affiliation, right? It's 73% Republican, 54% Democrat, 53% independent voters. Those are massive numbers here. One of the reasons the political establishment fights so hard to keep us from having to vote is they know if it goes on a ballot, we're going to blow these guys out of the box. Okay. So, are we going to get a chance to vote on it? Let's hope so. I mean, we're going to throw everything we can at it. And when it goes on a ballot, it's going to win. And then we go, what's next? So it's exciting stuff. And to your question about, do we think other Southern states will follow? I think a bunch of other states will follow. I think it's not just the South. I think it's New England. I think it's West Coast. I think it's Middle America. I mean, I think a lot are going to follow. Once the first one out the door lights the way for the rest and makes that path much easier. So, we can horse race it all we want to, but frankly, a rising tide raises all ships.
Last controversial question. Roe v. Wade happened, I don't know, a month or 2 months ago. And what technically happened was the Supreme Court said they didn't ban abortion. They didn't legalize abortion. They moved the decision to the states.
Yeah.
The states will make the decision. In return, two things happened. One, liberals said, we don't care what the federal government says. We don't care what any conservative state says. We're going to do our own thing. That's not federalism. Federalism was different states, laboratories of democracy. They have their own systems, and you have to respect other state laws in your state so that you kind of are able to have this different states as a cohesive unity thing. So Californians are supposed to recognize Texan laws, to a degree, et cetera. Although you have your own state law, that's federalism. So liberals said, we're not doing that. We don't care what any conservative state says. We don't care what the Supreme Court says. We defy everything. We're just going to go with laws that we want, not federalism. Now, in return, Mike Pence, the former vice president, a conservative, says, kicking this decision back to the states, that's stupid. We need a nationwide abortion ban. And 30% of the Republican Party nationally backed him. That, too, is not federalism. So Republicans have gone on and on for a century about returning power back to the states. And then when they do it, the former vice president and 30% of the party says, screw states' rights, we'll put national laws in. But liberals did the other thing where they said, we're not going to follow any other state laws commensurately or federal decisions. So given that you have both the left and the right violating the principles of federalism, should we have any faith that federalism works any longer in America at all?
Our Article 1, Section 1 of the Texas Constitution starts with the words, Texas is a free and independent state, subject only to the United States Constitution And the perpetuity of the Union depends on the right of local self-government unimpaired to all the states. So if I'm using our post-Civil War Constitution, Bill of Rights, Article 1, Section 1, as the litmus test, then according to our state constitution, the Union's over. I mean, it's done. I don't have to pronounce the federal government DOA when the death certificate is Article 1, Section 1 of our state constitution. The fact of the matter is, what we're seeing, okay, and this is going to get kind of into the weeds. What we're seeing here is the product of 150 years, probably more like 120 years of brainwashing the people to believe that the United States is a monolithic nation state. Okay. You just said it, a national ban, right? This idea. But when it was Madison himself that said that the Constitution was federal and not national, there was never any intent for the United States of America to become a monolithic, solitary nation state. It was always meant to be a federative republic of self-governing independent nation states that came together for a very limited purpose defined in the federal Constitution, right? And that's evidenced by Article 1, Section 10 in the list of things that states are forbidden from doing. And then the 10th Amendment, which is very clear when it says that any powers not granted to the federal government or prohibited to the states are reserved to the states and the people, okay? So the document says we are constructed one way, but we have had years upon years upon years, generational indoctrination of the belief that there is this mythical nation called the United States of America. They force our children to say a pledge to it and say things that are patently untrue every morning before school. So what we are seeing here is a clash. The friction is on one side, the actual intended construction of what this union was supposed to be, and then this indoctrination after, generational indoctrination. So people can't understand why these things are happening, and so you have all of this outrage. Look, you and I both know the only answer at the end of the day is for our states to become self-governing independent nations and to do business with one another in the way that self-governing independent nations work with one another around the world every single solitary day and have for many, many, many years, right? We can trade with one another. We can travel between one another. We can agree to a mutual defense compact. We can do all these things that self-governing independent nations around the world do, with one stellar exception. We don't have to take a knee to those 2.5 million unelected bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. We don't have to do it.
Yeah. I just felt that one of the arguments against secession for all of them, New Hampshire, Texas, California, is you don't need to secede. We just need a return of real federalism. I've heard that more times than I have fingers and toes. And I was pleased to see that it totally failed on a national scale, because what that tells me is you have no choice but secession. The Republicans failed at federalism. The liberals failed at federalism, which means your argument that federalism is the way to avoid secession is dead, which means that Texit and Calexit is actually the only solution.
When people say they want to fix the union, it's like, literally you and everyone else over the last several generations that have failed to do that very thing.
That's why I brought that up. And I'm not trying to pick on just conservatives. I think it was both sides, and I was like, the way it would have worked is if all conservatives and liberals said, great, Roe v. Wade's kicked back to the states. Awesome. We'll keep it there. That's not what happened. I mean, that would have been states going, you do your thing. We'll do our thing. It's cool. Maybe we can work out some sort of compact. The total opposite of that happened, which shows me you cannot make federalism work in this, quote, federal system, which means it doesn't work.
You can want to fix the federal system all you want to, but look, you can want in one hand and crap in the other and see which one gets filled the quickest.
Another Texas saying.
I can't, bro. I can't keep it straight. Let me show you a quote from Kathy Griffin. See what you have to say about this. Here's Kathy Griffin, liberal. If you don't want a civil war, vote for Democrats in November. If you do want a civil war, vote Republican. I would point out to you, Kathy Griffin is the one that thought it was funny to do a picture with a chopped off head of Donald Trump.
I would point out that tweet looks like it was, sent out about circa 1860. I mean, it literally, the verbiage fits. It's like, oh, okay, this I've seen this before.
That's so the rhetoric's getting worse. Is there anything you'd like to say to Californians? We got you here. Is there any message you'd like to say us? Is there news on your end that you think is important for everybody in America to know? Is there some messages you'd like to get out to the rest of us here on the West Coast?
Look, I think if I had, if this is my summary, it's gonna be simply this. And I'll tell the story just a little bit about my relationship with Dr. Thomas Naylor. So early in my journey in independence, right, which for me has been since August 24th, 1996. I mean, that's when it kicked off for me. So I've been at this a long time. But early on, probably 99, 2000, I met a man named Dr. Thomas Naylor. Dr. Naylor was a professor emeritus of economics at Duke University, and he was the founder of the Second Vermont Republic. And one of the things that happened over the years as we corresponded back and forth and got to know one another was we realized that very much probably like what we talked about here is from a policy perspective, we have very different perspectives on how things should be done. One thing from that standpoint that we could agree on, that we could be friends, that was really the tent pole of our friendship, was that the right of self-determination and right of self-government is a truly inalienable right. That while we didn't have to, if we were not in a situation where we had to be forced to govern one another or attempt to govern one another or control the reins of power so we could lord over one another, we could cooperate and we could do the things that friends do without having to take a knee to one another, right? I mean, this was what the Dr. Naylor's relationship taught me, and it's something I've carried through all the way, which is simply this. We may not agree on a ton of things from a policy perspective, but at the end of the day, we can build a friendship around mutual respect for the right of self-determination and self-government. And with that, I would just suggest to everyone in California that now is your opportunity. It's the message that I give when we speak to independence organizations around the world. Ultimately, all political power is inherent in the people, but it only works if you show them how powerful you are. So to our friends out there, go show them how powerful you are.
That's awesome. Quote from Thomas Naylor. We were showing a little bit about him while you were speaking of him. Our nation has truly lost its way. America is no longer a sustainable nation state, economically, politically, socially, militarily, or environmentally. The empire has no clothes. That was Thomas Naylor, professor of economics and founder of the Second Vermont Republic, who said that, I believe, about 20 years ago.
I miss the doc. I'll tell you, this is how committed Dr. Naylor was. So, they refer to Vermont as the Green Mountain State, and every letter he ever sent me was in green felt tipped pen. I mean, he was committed all the way down, even to the smallest detail. So, he's just a wonderful guy, man. I miss him every day.
Last question. I know you're busy, man. Appreciate if I can get one more question out of you.
You got one. Make it
okay,
count.
one.
Swing
okay,
for fences.
This is the last one.
Okay.
Recently, there was a liberal reporter who came out with an article said a MAGA secession could possibly work. A MAGA secession could possibly work. That was the title of the article.
Okay.
And in that article, she said, well, I'm not for national division, but if we have to, let's have a peaceful separation. We loved hearing that because she was saying if we have to, peaceful separation, which was great. But she kept saying, I'm not for a national division. If we have to, we have peaceful separation. But we probably don't need to have national division because, and this is literally what she said, quotes, it is my hope that come the November midterms, patriotic voters across the political rainbow will band together to disempower a national party bent on destroying democracy. For example, Liz Cheney is leading the way. So, do you believe that conservatives and Republicans who are real patriots are going to come together and join with Democrats because they realize that 74 million MAGA voters are an existential threat to democracy? And hey, Liz Cheney's already showing them how. Or does that seem like horse pucky, I believe is a Texas phrase? Which one, sir, in your opinion?
Well, first off, I've literally never heard anyone here use the term horse pucky. So let's take that off the table, okay?
No, my family. Okay.
I'm going to send you a dictionary, a Texas dictionary.
Okay.
We'll get that squared away. But anyway, look, it's hard for Liz Cheney to lead if she's in the bleachers, right? I mean, that makes no sense at all. I mean, it's ludicrous, all right? So let's just strip away the crap and let's get down to the nugget, right? Which is what you have to do with most of these articles about this issue is you got to dig through the poop to get to the peanuts, right? So let's get down to the peanuts. What we are seeing is a shift in the Overton window. And I think this is the important thing. A lot of people who are wanting action now are not really cognizant of how far this issue has come over the years, right? I mean, we've had to be out there. We've had to do a lot of things to even shift the debate. I mean, 2005, when we founded the organization, Texas Independence was polling in single digits. Okay. I mean, that's how bad it was. Okay. That this debate has come so far as that both sides of the partisan equation, because that's how they want to try to divide us, even though that's not how this issue works, are effectively saying that not only, I mean, you got to think 5 years ago, they would say it's not possible. It's unconstitutional. It's illegal. It could never happen. Now they're saying, well, I'm not saying that I want it to happen, but it might happen, but it probably won't because of this set of delusional circumstances. Liz Cheney, exposing her superpowers and shooting lasers out of her eyes and her butt or whatever kind of weirdness they have envisioned. But the fact of the matter is that I think articles like this are important because I think everyone should kind of take a step back, take that 30,000 foot view and realize that 5 years ago, it was heresy to have this conversation.
Yeah.
It was immediate. I'm used to being a heretic on this particular issue, right? That's not a problem for me, but for a lot of people, it's guys like us that have normalized this conversation. And think about how crazy it is. Think about how crazy it is that we're having to celebrate the normalization of a conversation about how we fundamentally govern ourselves. I mean, how crazy is that, right? How crazy is it that we have to celebrate the ability to really talk about the issue that was espoused in the document called the Declaration of Independence, which they say founded their own country, which weirdly enough brings us back full circle, Marcus, to their hypocrisy.
I just thought it was fantastical. I'm a liberal, but I thought so because I've heard other liberals say this. And they go, the way that we fix this is we got to reach out to reasonable Republicans. Yeah.
Really? So this is the thing that most of these folks don't understand. And I will tell you this. I had this explained to me in very real terms by a Democrat, a reporter that works for NPR that's here in Texas. And he said this. Came to one of our events. Afterwards, he was doing the interview. He turned his recorder off. He says, okay, I'm going to share this story with you. He said, so I have a bunch of friends in Massachusetts who, as you might imagine, are kind of like me. They're a little bit left on the political spectrum. He said, I went, and he said, we got into a conversation about gun laws. And he said, I told them that I owned a gun, and he said, you would have thought that I had transformed into Rush Limbaugh. Because, and I mean, this guy was a lifelong Democrat, right? I mean, he was a lifelong Democrat. And so what we get at the party level is much like what we get at the federal level. One size fits none, right? I want to tell you right now that there are people here in Texas in the Republican Party that look at Mitt Romney like he is to the left of Che Guevara. I mean, that's just the way it is, right? And I mean, it's no surprise. I mean, there are people here who think John McCain, who was a very hawkish Republican, was way too liberal for their taste, right? That is because there is this myth that the parties, much like the federal government, or the United States, is this monolithic thing, right? But you have flavors in between, and even inside the parties, you have varying flavors that are based on the state in which that party is located. Texas Republicans are not the same as Massachusetts Republicans. Texas Democrats are not the same as Oregon Democrats, So
like California Republicans?
Bingo. I mean, it's a very different thing. So so one of the reasons that they continue to try this partisan divide and why it continues to fail is because it doesn't work. That's why they're out here touting Liz Cheney so hard. See, here's a reasonable Republican. But when Republicans here in Texas look at Liz Cheney, they go, yeah, she does not look or act anything like Republicans here. So, so that's the difference. That's all I got for you, man. I gotta go.
Do you see moderate Republicans watch the January 6th hearings and they watched Biden's speech and they realized they were wrong? And for the good of America, they need to now come together and join with liberals and Democrats as patriotic Americans to vote down MAGA and turn their back on MAGA and the party. 74 million Americans need to do this for the good of the country. Is that reasonable, or is that just a fantasy?
Well, Marcus, that is fantasy, because let's be honest, there is no such thing as a moderate partisan anymore. That line has been drawn, and that speech basically encouraged people to get to one side of the line or the other. It set the in-out paradigm, and look, we know where that ends. Look, I read Lord of the Flies, man. I know where this goes.
We were just talking about that. We were literally just talking about how America's turned into Lord of the Flies. It's all children arguing with other children.
Yes, and it's all about who has the conch.
Exactly. And I was literally just telling the story on the other one where there was one kid who was kind of nerdy, and they had the conch, and they had a little bit of order. And then they killed him. And within like one day, the whole thing falls apart, because then it just turned into all children on children. That was the moral that I took away from the story. And I see America being similar, where you have my party, I want to act childish. And my party says, oh, you're going to act childish? Well, then we're going to act childish. And then now you're left with only children running the debate, which allows Lord of the Flies. That's what happened. You need adults to go, hey, I understand you guys are upset, but maybe you could share the ball with each other. No, I take the ball and punch him in the face. You need a parent, an adult to go, maybe you could have 5 minutes of the ball and then he could have 5 minutes. Otherwise, kids are like, screw him, destroy him. I take everything I want. Well, when I look at the political environment today, that's what I see on both sides.
Hey, I'm just saying, just going to throw it out there. If I eat the other person, I don't have to share the ball, right?
This is where we're at now. Watch. Somebody's going to go on TV and literally say what Jason's joking about. You know, right? Well, if we just ate Republicans, maybe that would make things better.
And honestly, all I'm thinking of right now is whether or not they could make a Lord of the Flies movie, but with Jeff Goldblum as the Fly.
Yeah, big Goldblum fans here. Thank you. That was That was a compliment from a Texan to us Californians, okay? He complimented a California-based actor, so we accept that and thank you.
I'm so confused.
Just know if we do get around to like having to all like, you know, eat each other in some Civil War eating competition or something, I'm going to need you to send me as much of that sweet Texas barbecue sauce as possible, my brother.
Yeah, that's kind of not fair, because if we had to eat each other, you guys have good barbecue sauce and we don't. We got like sriracha, which is good, but it's not. Yeah, so you guys would win better. Last question for you. Overton window. Where are we on the Overton window? It goes from unthinkable to radical to acceptable to sensible to popular and now policy. You made a brilliant observation saying if you go back in time, people wouldn't even talk about these ideas. Now they are talking about them, but they used to say they're crazy. Now they're saying, well, maybe it's crazy, but maybe we should think about it. Are we at the acceptable thing? If I look at Froma Harrop's article, A MAGA Secession, she keeps going, I don't want division, but if we had to, we do it this way. I don't want it, but if we had to. For me, that seems like we're at the acceptable thing. But where do you think? Am I wrong? Am I off? Where would you put it on the Overton window?
It depends on which segment of the population that I think you're dealing with, right? If you're dealing with the media and certain elements of it, it's acceptable, right? You can talk about it. But if you're dealing with people that I would say are, fairly not part of the political establishment, but politically aware, I think they're coming around to sensible. But if you look at the polling data, popular, you look at, okay, so one of the studies that we looked at for many years was that I think it was 2010. Rensselaer Polytechnic did the tipping point study, their social cognitive network study, whatever that is over there. Anyway, I forget the entire name of it, but anyway, they did this study of the tipping point theory, and they showed that in social networks, just not of the digital kind, but all, their data showed that when an opinion is held by I think it's 10% have an unshakable belief in a thing, that position is always adopted as the majority opinion over time, right? So there's since been one, I just saw the study yesterday and I need to dig into it. They pushed that number a little bit higher at 25%. But I think they also removed the unshakable belief component, right? So, anywhere from 10 to 25%, once you hit that, and that becomes sort of that organized force for change, then you're looking at that opinion being adopted by the majority of the population. So, for us, we've always fought for the tipping point number because we knew once we hit the tipping point number, it just kind of goes from there. And so when we're talking about the Overton window, I think we can simultaneously be all three of those things. I think for a percentage of the population, I think it's acceptable. I think you can make a case that some people think it's radical. Obviously, the people on the other side of it, but it's now acceptable, so we can talk about it. It's to a certain component, it's sensible because as they work through the stages of grief, that they're about to lose what they thought they had, then it becomes the sensible path, right? Pragmatism. And then the popularity comes once we hit that majority, which I think in some instances we definitely have. The polling data shows that that's the case here. I know as part of that same poll from Survey USA, I think New Hampshire was at 52 or 54% Republican. I mean, so the numbers are breaking that way, showing that it's moving toward popularity. But ultimately, the only way we will ever know it is popular, whether or not it's popular, is to put the question on the ballot and let the people vote.
I love it. I'm all out of questions. Is there anything you'd like to share with us out here in the left coast?
We did that already. Marcus.
Okay. Sorry, I got wound up. Jason.
No. Look, I'm as good on the soapbox as anybody, man. I love it. So thank you guys for let me do a drive-by on y'all today. This has been fun.
That's a Cali term.
Oh
And
yeah.
thank you for drinking our Kool-Aid. That's a Cali term.
Okay.
Drinking the Kool-Aid means you bought what we're selling. So if I'm saying apples are great and you start saying apples are great, you drink like Kool-Aid.
Look, I understand the Jim Jones reference when I hear it.
Yeah, you got that. That's where that comes from.
Speaking of Jim Jones, Jason, you need to maybe switch those up for some aviators.
Yeah, well, if I ever get out to Texas, I'll definitely bring
Get you some aviators. Get on there,
I know there's a need for serious eye protection for me out there.
All right, gentlemen. Well, my live stream jumps off in less than an hour, so I'm out of here. You guys enjoy the rest, and thanks for letting me come in and visit with y'all.
I love it. We'll talk to you soon.
we might try and tune in for your live stream too.
Come on, let's go win.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
All right. Peace. Thank you. Well, that was Daniel Miller, president of Texas Nationalist Movement. That concludes the show where we talked about liberals backing this, and then Daniel Miller came on the show. I think we're going to make a separate post just to highlight that Daniel Miller was here, and we'll get that out on Twitter and mark the point in the show where he came on. So you can watch the show and just watch the liberal stuff, and then we'll do another post if that's okay with you. And I'll find it the minute and go, if you want to see Daniel Miller, click the same video, but go to this minute, and then you can watch it and watch him. We'll get a graphic going.
Yeah.
I figured out something like that.
Oh, nice.
Okay. We'll be back in a minute with another show on how the World Economic Forum and the European Union effectively recognized California as independent nation recently. We'll cover that news coming up very soon.